Alright, user guide, Trimble. Why are grid lines not being shown on a particular level? Having activated the display grid line and construction lines and the scene content for a particular 2D or 3D view, you may still find grid lines are not displaying particular levels. In this situation, you first check the level of the property to ensure that the grid lines are set to be shown. This is done as follows. Open the level of the branch structural tree. 2. Left-click the level that you want to have with the grid shown. 3. In properties window for the level to show with the grids in plain view to make the grids visible. In 2D view, show grids in 3D view to make grids visible at level at 3D views. If the grids are still not visible in 3D view, certain level, you'll need to ensure that you have applied levels and questions. How do I am applying existing architectural grid to a specific level? How am I applying existing architectural grid to special level? Open architect grids branch for structure tree. Right click architectural grid name required, then pick edit in the context menu. Ensure the levels in which you architectural grid to apply are all checked. How do I create a rectangular grid line system? Make sure that the 2D view representative of the construction level you want to create with a rectangular grid system is active. Click Model Grid Line, select Rectangular Wizard, and enter the name and choose the color of the grid lines you want to create. If you want to create the same grid layout in every construction level in your building, ensure each level is selected in the dialog box. If you don't want the grid to be displayed in a particular level, clear it. Define the origin grid system, and either by clicking 2D View or entering the Rectangular Grids Wizard dialog. Choose the grid lines you want to create, the X direction only and Y direction only, both directions, or in both directions. Choose the grid line represented with a dash dot and that you want to use the grid lines. Define layout grids for the bays in the X direction. If you have only creating grid lines in the X direction, the wizard skips this step. If you can define regular or irregular grid layout, for regular grid, define the number of bays you want to create and bays in center. For irregular grids, you define the distance between the successive pairs of grid lines separately with the numbers by comma. If you want a number of bays that are same center, then you can specify with the signal entry. If you have bay centers 18 foot, 27 foot, 18 and a half, 18 and a half, 18 and a half, or 27, you can simply apply this by 18 foot, 27 and 3, 18 by 6 inches and 24/7. You can specify the reference for the first grid line by how you want to increment reference, give references to the other lines you want to create. Numerical grid line numbering is self-explanatory. The alphanumeric grid line is specifically the first grid references to be D. Specify the increment 3. Your grid lines will be referenced D, G, J, and M. Define the layout of the grid's bays in the Y direction. If you're only creating grid lines in the Y direction, Wizard skips this step. You can define regular grid layout. For regular grid, you define the number of bays you want to create in the bay centers. If the regular grid is defined with the distance by successive pairs of grid lines, separate the numbers by commas. If you have the number of bays for the same center, then you can specify a single entry. If your bay centers are 18, 27, and 18 and a half, 18 and a half, and 18 and 27, you can specify those 18 foot, 27 and 3, 18, 16, 18 and a half, and 27 inches. Again, you can reference the reference of the first grid line, how you want to increment grid line, the reference of the reference for the other lines you want to create. And then define the rotation of the grid. You can do this graphically by moving the mouse over the 2D view with clicking and entering value with the wizard dialog. If you use the later approach, you can specify the rotation with either respect of the grid system, local X or local Y directions. This is usually going to create a grid system which is not orthogonal. Finally, specify the angle between the grid axes. You can do this with respect to either the X and Y system. Click Finish to create the grid layout. Again, you can do this graphically, or you can use the wizard dialog. It's your choice. How to create a radial grid system. In making a 2D view representing construction level you want to create a radial grid system, click Model Grid Line, select Sector Wizard. If you want to create a same grid layout every construction level that you're building, ensure that each level is checked in the dialog box. If you don't want the grid to be displayed at a particular level, clear it. Define the origin grid system, entering either by clicking 2D view or entering coordinates for the radial grid wizard dialog. 5. Choose which grid lines you want to create, radial lines or arcs only. But choose the grid line represented with a dash, dot, or dot. Then you want to use the grid lines. Define the layout of the arcs that you want to create. If you're only creating radial grid lines, the wizard skips this. You can define regular or irregular grid layout. For regular grid, define the number of arcs that you want to create and the distance between them. For irregular, and define the difference between successive pairs of arc lines, separating the numbers by comma. If you have a number of arcs of the same distance apart, then you can specify the single entry. We have 9, 12 foot, 10 and a half, and 10 and a half, 10 and a half, and 12. You can specify this as 9 foot, 12 foot, 3 by 10 and a half, and 12 12 inches. Also, you can specify the reference of the first grid line how much you want to increment the reference with either the reference of the other lines that you create. The numerical grid line numbering is self-explanatory. Alphanumeric grid line specify the first grid references to be D, specify the increments of 3. Your grid line reference D, G, J, M. You can also choose with the arc grid lines of the true curve of the represented as series of straight lines between the points of the arc intersect the other grid lines created by the part of the process. 7. Define the layout radial grid segments that you want to achieve. If only creating grid arcs, the wizard skips a step. If you define with a regular, irregular radial line layout, for regular layout, define the number of the radial lines you want to create, then angle between them. The irregular radial line layout, define the angle between successive parts. Pairs of radial lines separating numbers by common numbers of the lines that have the same center as you can see with a single entry. If you have 30 degrees, 45, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 45, you can simply put 3, 45, 4, wild, 30, 45. Again, you specify the reference for the first grid line. You have the increment the reference, give it the reference to the other radial lines you create. Finally, define the rotation of the grid. You can graphically move the mouse over the 2D view, clicking and entering value with the wizard dialog. If you later approach, you can specify the rotation either with respect to the grid system, local X, or local Y directions. How to create single grid line between 2 points. Make sure the 2D view representing the construction level on which you want to create the grid line is active. If you want to create a series of the grid lines for the regular, rectangular, radial grid system, Tekla, structural design, rectangular, and sector wiz give the speedy solutions. Click model grid line, select grid line, pick a point where the grid line is to start, point 1. The tooltip give the cursor coordinates exactly. If it is not snapped to an existing point, you can press F2. To enter exact coordinates of the point required. Pick the point where you want the grid line to end. Point 2. The tooltip displays either the absolute relative of the polar coordinates for the point 2, depending on the ABS relative of the polar button. Is highlighted in the status bar at the bottom of the right screen, to which to switch is simply click on the other buttons. The grid line is created between the points you picked. The grid line does not extend infinity because please take care to ensure that the grid line is sufficient length to meet your needs. How do I create a parallel grid line? The option creates a grid line parallel to existing one, but of the different length of the want to open. Want to use this option, you must at least have one existing grid line to current 2D window. Click model grid line, select parallel, enter the name of the grid line property window, select the grid line which for the new grid line is to be parallel. You select the dotted line parallel to the grid selected with step 3, which follows the cursor of the tooltip. Give the distance of the dotted line with the initial grid line with the selected in step 3. With you can press F2 with the enter with the exact distance if required. As you zoom further and further into the model distance by which the cursor moves, the alter smaller and smaller increments, so far more and more the accuracy moves zoom in. Once you've achieved the distance you require, click to locate the new grid line in position. Pick the point to define with the end of the extent 1 and 1 extent. Pick a second point, define extent 2 extent. 6. If the new grid line is created, you can now move the cursor continuing places of the grid line. Respect line picked in step 3. Press escape to end grid placement. Alright, how to create one or more parallel new grid line is 6. New grid line is created now with the move of the cursor continuing placing other grid lines with respect to the line picked in step 3. Press escape to end grid placement. How do I create one or more parallel quick grid lines? The option creates one or more grid lines parallel to the same length existing one. If you for the option, you must have the one existing grid line in the current 2D window. Click model grid line, select parallel quick. Select the grid line to which the new grid lines will be parallel. You will see the lines parallel to the grid line you selected step 3, which will follow with a cursor. Tooltip gives the distance for the new line from the initial grid line you selected in step 2. As zoom further and further into the model distance, which of the cursor moves alters smaller and smaller increments, so far more accuracy zoom in. You can define single grid line series with the grid lines regular irregular layout. For single grid line, click the place of the press F2 to define the offset exactly. For series of the grid line, press F2 to define the distance between successive pairs of grid lines, separating the numbers by commas. If the number of bays that are in the same center but expressed by the single entry, the bay enters 18 foot, 27 foot, 18 and a half, 18 and a half, 18 and a half, and 27. You can specify by 18 foot, 27 and 3, 18 and a half, and 27 inches. How do I create a perpendicular grid line? If you want to use the option, you must have at least one grid line in the current 2D window. Click model grid line, select perpendicular, enter the name of the grid line property window, select the grid line with the new grid line is to be perpendicular with the dotted line overlaying in the grid line section selected. You step 3 with which you follow with the cursor. Tooltip: give the perpendicular distance to the new grid line from the middle of the grid line selected in step 3. As zoom further and further into the model over the distance by within the cursor, move with a smaller increments so far more accuracy zoom in. Once you've achieved the distance you require, quickly locate the grid line at the position. Pick the point with the defined extent 1 extent. Pick the second point with the defined extent 2. New grid line is created. You can now move the cursor, continuing placing other grid lines with respect to the line picked in step 3. Press escape to end grid placement. How do I create a grid arc? Model a grid line, select arc, and enter the name of the grid line property window. Select the point of the lines for the center of the grid arc where you want to create. Tooltip: give the cursor coordinates exactly. As you move the cursor, you'll see a line rotate for the center defined in step 3. For the end of the mark is still with the grid arc. Are you creating once you've achieved the required location? Click these, see this. Note you see the two dotted lines, a radial line center defined in step 3 for the arc indicates sweep of the grid arc you are creating. Once you have achieved the required sweep, click create your new arc on the position. How do I import grids of the DXF or import DXF as a shadow? The DXF file, if you want it, must be available to try import process. You can either have the been sent file or have created yourself some other application. 2D view with the construction, enable the grid line drop down, click model grid line, select import DXF. You'll see an open dialog book to navigate the folder which contains the files you want. To import, select the appropriate file name and open. You'll now see the DXF import wizard. First page of the dialog allows you to control the layers, colors in which you want to import, self-explanatory. More interest output options that will allow you to choose the architectural grids and or shadow. If you're importing architectural grids from the DXF file with the elements for the selected layers of the DXF file may be mapped in Tekla structural design grid lines, you must be therefore ensure that you switch off the layers of the DXF apart from the layers with the grids that have been defined. If you're importing DXF as a shadow, take the Tekla structural design imports DXF file, but it does not create a Tekla structural design objects. You can use these insertion points such as sources of which for the Tekla structural design objects you require. If you require to adjust the scale and offset throughout the DXF before proceeding, click next to move to the second page of the dialog box. The architectural grids options allow you to control how the grids are created by layer. Select by layer, separated named grids from each layer imported with the DXF. Select by color, separated named grids with each color imported with the DXF. And select merge to single merge grid containing every layer, and color imported from the DXF. If you want to import same grid layout of every construction level of the building, ensure that each level is checked with the dialog. If you want a grid to be displayed with a particular level, clear it. Click finish to close the wizard and complete the import. How do I set an initial number of letters used to grid? Initial number of letters used the grid numbering is specified in the model settings. New grids automatically with the next available number of letters depending on whether the label numerically or alphanumerically. Click Home Model Settings. Use the Reference General sub-tab with initial values. Also is get the name style. How do I change the name color with the existing architectural grid? Expand architectural grid structural T to display with existing grids. Pick architectural grid name to be changed from the list. Use the property wizards to see and amend the detail of the architectural grid. How do I change the name of the individual grid line or arc? Select the grid line arc to be renamed and edit the username from the grid line shown in the properties window. How do I renumber all the grids? Right-click architectural grid structural T, choose renumber from the menu. Every grid line in the model is renumbered in the sequence. How to extend, move, or rotate grid lines or arcs? Grid line can be modified as follows. It can be stretched, shortened, rotated, and by moving one of its ends of the nose. It also can move in the perpendicular direction, moving its center node. Similarly, grid arc can be modified as follows. It can be stretched, shortened by one of its ends of the node. It can have the radius adjusted, moving the middle node of the arc parameter. It can be moved in any direction, moving against center node. Grid lines and arcs are only moved in 2D and not in 3D view. How do I stretch or shorten and rotate a grid line? In 2D view, select only the grid line you want to modify to. End node, center node of the grid line should be visible. So select one of the end nodes of the grid line, click where the node is to be moved. The grid line moves to the new position accordingly. How do I move a grid line in a perpendicular direction to the view? Select the grid line you want to modify to end node. The grid line should become visible. Select the center node of the grid line. Click where the node is to be moved. The grid line moves to the new position accordingly. How do I sketch and shorten a grid arc? In 2D view, select only the arc you want to modify. Two end nodes, middle node of the arc parameter show becomes visible along with the node and center arc. Click the select end of the nodes. Click the node is to be moved. The arc shortens and shortens accordingly. How do I adjust radius of the arc grid arc? In 2D view, select only the arc you want to modify. Two end nodes, middle node of the arc parameter show become visible along with the node of the center of the arc. Click the settle and select the middle node of the parameter. Click wherever the node is to move, and arc radius adjusts accordingly. How do I move a grid arc? In 2D view, you select only the arc you want to modify to, and node's middle node of the arc parameter should become visible along with the node as the center of the arc. Select the center node of the arc, click where the node is to be moved. The arc is in a new position accordingly. Construction lines serve the same purpose for the architectural grid lines only without displaying a grid bubble. How do I create a rectangular construction line system? Make sure the 2D view representation construction level which you want to create with the rectangular construction line is active. Click model construction line, select rectangular wizard to define the origin and construction line system either by clicking 2D view or entering coordinates of rectangular grid wizard dialog. Choose only construction lines you want to create, X direction only, Y direction only in both directions, or choose the line representation dash dot or dot that we want to use for the construction lines. Define the layout construction lines for the bays in the X direction. If you're only creating construction lines in the X direction, the window will skip these steps. You define regular construction line layout. The grid view is defined by the number of bays you create with the bays in center. For regular grid, you define the distance between successive pairs of the construction line separated by numbers by comma if the number of bays that are same centers is getting specified with a single entry. If the base centers are 18, 27, and 18 and a half, 18 and a half, 18 and a half, and 27, you can do 18, 27, and 3, 18, 6, and 27. Define the layout construction lines of the bay in Y direction. If you're only creating construction lines in the Y direction window, the wizard skips this step. Define the rotation of the grid. You can do this graphically. Move the mouse over the 2D view with the clicking and entering value of the wizard dialog. If you later approach is specifying the rotation either with respect to the construction line system, local X, or local Y direction. Useful for going to create construction line system which is not orthogonal. Finally, specify the angle between the construction line axis. You can do this with respect to X and Y axis. Finish with the create with the construction line layout. Again, you with the graphically, you with the wizard dialog. It's your choice. Alright, how do I create a radial construction line system? Make sure the 2D view represents for the construction level that you want to create with the radial construction line system. Shift the model of the construction line, select sector wizard. Find origin of grid system by either clicking 2D view, entering the coordinates of the radial grid wizard dialog. Choose the construction line you want to create, radial lines, arcs only. Both of these choose the lines representation dash dot dot. Well, then when you want to use the construction line, define the layout of the arcs that you will create. If you're only creating a radial construction line, the wizard skips this step. You define regular layout. For the regular layout, define the number of arcs you can create with the distance between them. For the regular layout, you have the distance between successive parts, arc lines separating numbers by commas. If you have the number of arcs the same, the distance applied with a single entry. Our entries of 9 foot, 12 foot, 10 and a half, 10 and a half, 10 and a half, and 12 inches. You specified 9 foot, 12 foot, and 3 by 10, 10 and a half inches by 12. You can also achieve whether the arc construction lines or the true curve of the representative of the true of the straight lines between these points of the arc intersect with the other construction lines created with a part of this process. 6. Define the layout radial construction line segments you want to achieve. If you're only creating arcs where the wizard skips this step, you can define regular radial line layout. Regular layout, define radial lines you want to create with the angle between them. A regular radial line layout defined with the angle successive pair for the radial line separating with the numbers by commas. If you have the number of lines or same centers specified with a single entry, 30, 45, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 45. You can specify 30, 45, 4 30s, 4 wildcard 30 at 45. Finally, define with the rotational layout. You can graphically move the mouse over the 2D view, clicking and entering the value of the wizard dialog. If you use the later approach, you can specify the rotation either with respect to the construction line system, local X, and local Y directions. How do I create a single construction line in 2 points? If you want to create a series of construction lines from a regular, rectangular radial system, Tekla structural design wizard give it the speedy solutions. Make sure that the 2D view representation construction level you want to create with the construction line is active. You would click model and construction line. 3. Pick the user point with the construction line to start. Point 1. Tooltip give the cursor coordinates exactly. If not, snap to the existing point. You can press F2 with the enter with the exact coordinates of the points required. Pick the point we want the construction line to end. Point 2. With the tooltip displays the absolute relative polar coordinates for the point 2. With depending on the absolute relative of the polar buttons highlighted with the taskbar at the bottom of the right screen with the switch of the display. Simply click one of the other buttons of the construction lines created between the points you picked. The grid line does not extend in infinity. Please take care to ensure that the grid line is sufficient length to meet your needs. How do I create a parallel construction line? Option create with a construction line parallel the existing line with a different length for the U of the option. You must have at least one existing grid line construction line in the current 2D window. Click Model Construction Line, select Parallel, select the line where the new construction line is to be parallel. Use the dotted line with the if you see the dotted line and parallel with the line is selected in step 3, you'll follow the cursor of the tooltip, give the distance for the dotted initial line with the selection step 3, press F2 for the exact distance of the required. As zoom in further into the model of the distance will evolve. The cursor moves the alter in smaller increments for the accuracy zoom in. Once achieving the distance you require, quickly locate the new construction line at the position, pick the point that define N1 extent, and pick second point to define this N2 extent. The new construction line is now, you can now move the cursor, continuing placing other construction lines with respect to the line picked to end in step 3, press escape to end construction line placement. How do I create one or more parallel quick construction lines? Option creates one or more construction line parallel to the same length as an existing line. Once you view the option, you must have at least one existing grid or construction in its current 2D window. Model with the construction line, select the parallel quick, select the line with the new construction line when it will be parallel. 3, we will see a list of line which is parallel to one selected in step 3, which follow the cursor of the tooltip and give the distance from new line initial. You'll select step 3 as zoom in further and further into the model of the distance with the cursor, move the alter smaller increments, so far more accuracy zoomed in. You can define a single construction line or series of lines with a regular irregular layout. For single construction line, click place to the press F2 to define the offset exactly. For series of line, F2 to define the distance between successive pairs, separating the numbers by comma. If the number of the base are at the same center, then you can specify the single entry. If the base centers are 18, 27, and 18.5, 18.5, 18.5, and 27 inches, you can modify that. You can specify them as 18 foot, 27 and 3 by 18.5 and 27. You can create a perpendicular construction line. If you want to use the option, you must have at least one existing grid construction current 2D window. Click the construction line, select the perpendicular, select when the new construction line is to be perpendicular. You'll see a dotted overlining line selected step 3, which follows with the cursor. The tooltip gives the perpendicular distance of the new line from the middle of the line you've selected in step 3. Zoom further and further into the model of the distance to the cursor, move the whole through smaller and smaller increments, so far more accuracy zoom in. Once you've achieved the distance you require, click the locate the new construction line at position point of the defined N1 extent and second point to define N2 extent. New construction line is created. Now you move the cursor, continuing placing construction lines with the respective lines picked in step 3. Press escape to end the construction line placement. How do I create a construction line arc? Click the model construction line, select arc, select the point in which the center arc with the want to create. With the tooltip, give the cursor coordinates exactly. As you move the cursor, you'll see the line and rotate for the center defined in step 3. For the end of the line marks the start of the arc you're creating. Once you have achieved the required location, click to set this. Now achieve the two dotted lines, radial line through the center defined in step 3 with the arc and indicate the sweep of the arc you're creating. Once you've achieved the required sweep, click create with a new arc at its position. How do I extend and move the rotate construction lines or arcs? As construction line can be modified as follows. They can be stretched, shortened, and rotated, moving one to the end of the nodes. It can be moved in parallel to a perpendicular direction, moving in the center node. Similarly, the construction arc can be modified as follows. It can be stretched, shortened, or moving one of the end of the nodes. It can be raised, adjusted, move the middle node over the arc parameter. It can move in any direction, moving the center node. Constructing a line and arcs can also only be moved in 2D and not in 3D view. How do I stretch, shorten, or rotate a construction line? In 2D view, select only the construction line you want to modify. Two end nodes and center node of the construction line should be visible. Select one of the end node of the construction line. Choose where the node is to be moved with the construction line. Move the new position accordingly. How do I move the construction line with a perpendicular direction? In 2D view, select only the construction line you want to modify to, and node of the center of the node of the construction line should be visible. Select the center node of the construction line. Click where the node is to be moved with the construction line. Move with the new position accordingly. How do I stretch or shorten a construction arc? In 2D view, select only the arc you want to modify to, end node with the middle node of the arc parameter should be visible, along with the node with the center of the arc. Select one of the end nodes. Click their nodes to be moved, and the arc strengthens and shortens accordingly. How do I adjust the radius of the construction arc? With the 2D view, select only the arc you want to modify to, end nodes with the middle node of the arc parameter should become visible, along with the node of the center of the arc. Click to select the middle node of the parameter. 3. Click for the node is to be moved. The arc radius adjusts accordingly. How do I move the construction arc? 2D view, select only the arc that you want to modify to, and node with the middle node of the arc parameter should become visible along with the node of the center of the arc. Select the center node of the arc and whether the node is to be moved, the arc and move to the new position accordingly. Dimensions. Dimension allows you to show the distance structural between appropriate points if the dimensions are included, but only included on any drawings you create. How to create a single dimension, click model dimension, click the grid point at the start of the dimension, click the grid point and the dimension. Tekla structure will show you the lines between the 2 points. Move this line point where you want the dimension line to lie, somewhere with an easy visible non-conflict to the rest of the model detail. Tekla structure will designer show the dimension line itself with 2 locator lines as to extend. Simply move the dimension line correct location, click it to create it. Seal cold rolled in cold form member modeling seal columns cold form column seal column overview.